Well, hello and welcome to the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast. I'm sure a lot of you out there have opened a few bottles of wine in your time, and you've probably done something that most of us do every time, which is throw away the cork, never giving it a second look. Maybe you checked it to make sure it wasn't a little funky, didn't have anything weird or smells or anything like that. And I was the same way, but that changed last year when I met my guest on this episode, PJ All, the Director of Marketing and Sales at Amorim Cork America. And I have to tell you something. This is not a religious podcast, but this woman, she put my face on a cork. She took me on a tour, and she straight up converted me to the Church of Cork. And now here I am, a changed woman, ready to convert all of you to the wonderful world of cork, which is a fascinating one and one that had so much more detail and nuance than I had ever imagined, but also a world that I didn't realize should have mattered to me as much as it did. Like, yes, cork is interesting, and yes, we're going to talk about why it's interesting and all the different facets of it, but also there's a lot of like applicable things in our wine drinking world that are cork related, and we just had no idea. So we're going to be going over all of those things like misnomers, including ones that I'm guilty of propagating myself. One in particular that will blow your mind that I'm sure a lot of you have thought was true for a very long time, but I'm telling you, we're going to blow your minds. Stick around for that. And then also I am going to ask PJ a question that I get all the time, which is, what the heck do you do with the cork after it's done? Spoiler alert, it's not make Christmas ornaments, and it's not put them in that cork holder that you got at Home Goods. No shade, we love the cork holders, but like, you know, there's better uses for your corks. So please, welcome to the show, my friend PJ.
Oh man, you can use cork for 1,000 things. Cork is the coolest material in the world. It really is. I was very similar to you, Amanda. Before I learned about cork, I had no idea how fascinating the world of cork is, what it was. It was just in between me and the wine. And now I will probably spend my life just learning about cork and talking about it. It's such a special material. You can do so many things with cork, not just a stopper, but earrings, shoes, you name it.
Couple housekeeping things for those who are listening. Number one, we are not doing the normal format of this podcast today. We're skipping over the current events, the what's going on in the wine world. It's not happening today. There's too much to cover. Number two, if you are drinking with us, which means you are a member of the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast wine club, that means that you are drinking this wine right here, the Markus Nicolini Ranch Carignane. We're going to talk about this wine in a second. So if you haven't grabbed it already, grab it, pull the cork, but don't throw it away because we're going to talk about the cork. And number three, this is definitely a show that I feel like is going to be better served on YouTube in video forms. You can kind of see all the different things that we're talking about. I'm going to show you cork examples. I'm going to throw some B-roll up because PJ and I also, we did like a Mecca thing. We went to Portugal to go see some cork trees last year, and not even last year, it was like 6 months ago. Yeah. And we had such a great time. So I'm going to throw some footage up of the cork trees. I'm going to throw some footage up of some of the production stuff that we saw. So if you're really curious, I definitely recommend heading over to the YouTube channel. Everything is going to be linked in the description below. And then as always, if you are not a member of the Wine Access Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club, this is your moment to rectify that so you can join in on the fun and you can drink with us. PJ is a great drinking companion. I know this from experience. So well, 10 out of 10, no notes, highly recommend. Get some wine in your glass and let's make it the Unfiltered Podcast Wine Club wine.
Yes. So I guess the first thing, we'll start with the basics. What is cork? You kind of talked a little bit about it being a tree. But cork is the bark of a tree. So this is a natural cork that you're popping out of this amazing Carignane, by the way, if you're enjoying this. And it is truly just a piece of bark. It's 100% a piece of cork oak, and it's a special type of material. There's no other type of cork, or there's no other type of oak like a cork oak. It's very specific. It's Quercus suber is the scientific name of this tree. Ooh. And the way that you harvest cork is, you could think a lot about like shearing a sheep. You remove the bark and you don't cut the tree down. So number one thing about cork, It's one of the most regenerative forms of agriculture that exists in the world. There's a lot of greenwashing about other closures or the sustainability pitch, but cork is truly the most sustainable closure in the world. You don't harm the tree. It actually, when you harvest cork, it makes the carbon sequestration of the cork 2 to 5 times higher when you harvest the bark off the tree, which is incredible. So while you're opening a bottle of wine and you pull out a cork, you are doing good for the world. So you're saving the world one cork at a time. It's kind of cheesy, but true.
No.
And I think you have a picture of the bark or a example of the bark. But so this cork literally gets punched from that piece of bark.
Ready? We're going to show everybody.
Yes. So that is what a natural cork is. It's pretty incredible. So in order to get a natural cork, the interesting thing is you have to wait until the third harvest of the tree. So the first time
Which takes how long, PJ?
The first time you will harvest a cork tree, the cork tree will be around 25 years old. And that will never be thick enough for a natural cork. Those corks will be made into flooring, earrings, other applications, insulation. Then you wait 9 years to harvest the second harvest. And that could make microgranulated corks or sparkling corks, but never a natural cork. And only until the third harvest, which is 43 years old, you will be able to punch a natural cork. So it is a long game industry. It's a very romantic industry. It's been around for a long time. 50% of the world's cork, around 50%, is harvested in Portugal, and then around 30% in Spain, and the rest in Northern Africa, France, Italy. And it's a very special harvesting process. The cork farmers are some of the highest paid farmers in the world. It's a really specialized agricultural work. It's passed down from generations.
It's done by hand, by the way.
It's done by hand.
This is not a machine thing. Like, these are guys that are climbing trees using ladders, shifting around, and like trees that are not just like a uniform shape. Like there's a lot of tree happening in lots of different positions and going in lots of different directions.
Yes, a very complicated tool, an axe, is used from the farmers. It generally happens between May and August, so that's the harvest time. And the cork, generally people that harvest the cork, they say the tree has to give you its bark. It's a very romantic thing.
How Portuguese.
Yeah, it has to give you its bark. It has to be the right environment. It can't be too moist and it can't be too dry. The cork has to release from the tree. So it's something that if you haven't had a chance to see, you should definitely make it a point when you're in Portugal to go to the south of Portugal. It's central to South Portugal. It's where most of the cork forests are, and see it. It's a very bucolic, wonderful place to go. I would love to just put a hammock in the cork forest and hang out there all day. It is a very special thing. Generally, all old school families that have owned these forests for years and years and years, and it's really special.
It is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, and I was looking forward to it for a long time, and seeing it in action, like it's a very fast process, but it's also a very labor intensive, very manual process. And you see those like sheets of cork just coming off of the tree, and then you see them just like laying on the ground. You're like, wow, this is truly one of the most regenerative, sustainable things, because number one, you're fueling an ecosystem just naturally that wants to be harvested. You're fueling an economy, right? You are also producing a very sustainable product. But also, like, let's talk about the properties of cork itself and why it makes such a great stopper for wine and why it has been used for as long as it has.
It's lightweight and it's impermeable to liquids. And every cubic centimeter of a cork, you're looking at 40 million cells. So it's pretty incredible. It's really hard to replicate. I'm sure at some point some scientific person could do that, but not at a cost that would be insane. Nature has a really amazing way of doing things. It floats. It actually, I'd mentioned it was impermeable to liquids. So speaking of a myth, a lot of people believe that corks breathe, a lot of the oxygen comes from the outside when you're aging your wines. But with the cellular structure of a cork, most of the oxygen that gets into your wine over the life of the wine will come from within the cork. So actually, cork protects your wine from the outside environment, where a lot of other closures maybe can control oxygen transfer, but it's coming from the outside or it never stops. Whereas cork protects your wine. If you've stored your wine in a stinky cellar for a long, long period of time, you can open these amazing wines and they're still just as beautiful as the day that you bottled them. They've just developed over time with the phenolics of the wine or of the cork. So it's pretty special.
This was like a mind blown moment because in addition to seeing the trees and seeing the production, we sat down with, you've got like a crazy lab and like a guy who does all your research. And that was one of the things that he went over, and he sort of said it in passing. And I was like, wait, back up. Because my whole life as a sommelier and in the wine industry, it was like this thing called oxygen transfer rate, which is the rate at what I thought was the oxygen was coming, even though liquid was impenetrable, the oxygen was coming through the cork, and that's the exchange that was happening within the actual bottle. But he said, no, the most of the oxygen is actually coming from within the cells of the cork, and that is the transfer that's happening. It is not from the outside world, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
The other thing that he said, and this is another like fun fact that I think a lot of us are like within the last year, it's starting to, you can see it in the comments when people are talking about wine storage and how you should be storing your wine. My whole life, I have been told that I should be storing wine on its side. Why should I be storing wine on its side? To keep the cork moist, to keep it from drying out. No, I was incorrect. Please correct me.
If the storage conditions are proper and you have a good cellar temp and the humidity of the space is good, you can store the wines upright or in its side. It doesn't matter, because if the seal is proper on the glass and the cork, then the moisture of the headspace between the cork and the wine will keep the cork completely moist. So it's 100% humidity there. So if the seal is properly done, it's not going to affect the humidity at all, whether it's on its side or not.
Right.
So moisture really only matters for the time of bottling, because it's all about being inserted and making sure the seal is done properly, more so than it is for long-term ageability. And it's a really fun fact. But if you want that red bottom, you will need to have that connection between the wine and the cork. But in terms of long-term storage, with moisture of the cork should not dry out if you leave it upright.
Yeah, that one like blew my mind, because you see any cellar and like all the wines are laying down. And honestly, like for configuration standpoint and like space, like it makes sense. But the reason that we've always been told to store it on its side was that the cork needed to be in contact with the wine. And that again was another like,
and tradition,
are you kidding me right now?
It's very hard to move away from that once, a study's done. And
totally.
It's a really cool fact. So don't be worried if you're somebody that buys cases of this wine club or these wines, and you just stack the cases on top of each other and don't have time to put them on their side. It will be okay. The corks won't dry out.
You're not just to clarify, you're not hurting the wine or the cork for that matter by laying it aside. It was just this idea that you had to do that because of this interaction. That was one of those things that I was like, why is this not being shouted from the rooftops? I feel like this is brand new information in a world that rarely has brand new information. And so I loved that. And I loved learning from, I forget what his name was, the researcher that we talked to.
Dr. Cabral, Miguel Cabral.
That man, he's got all the info, and like talk about a guy that has just truly spent his life like researching into things that I never knew needed researching. Mm-hmm. I could have sat there the entire day and just continued listening to him speak. It was amazing.
It's incredible. I mean, Amorim is a company that has just dumped decades of research for cork.
Yes.
And all things cork. We're just curious, and there's still so much research we don't know. And the really cool thing about research and being science based is when we find out things that maybe we had thought before. We thought the same thing about the oxygen coming from outside, and then we said, "Oh, we were wrong." So that's
Just
the cool
kidding.
thing about science. Yeah. So it's pretty special, and it's great to have him on the team.
Yeah, really an amazing opportunity to speak with him. I know there's a lot of other research that is happening into the world of corks, but before we get there, you mentioned the wine club, and I feel like we haven't appropriately started this podcast by cheersing with our wine. I mentioned this is the Markus Carignane from Lodi. Oh,
it has a great nose. It's amazing. Yeah.
I could just live in this. It literally smells like, you know, that period, well, you're in California right now, but like that period between like fall and winter where like the leaves are just starting to like come off and it's like starting to smell a little cold outside. Like that's what this wine smells like. Like it's not quite like mid-fall. It's like right after where it just starts to get this chill. I know some of you out there are like, this woman is insane. I know. I'm at church right now. This is what's happening.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful wine.
Let me back up a little bit and tell you about this wine. So I assume you've been to Lodi at some point in your career.
Of course.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't been to Lodi, you know, this is a place it's in California. It's in Northern California. It's closer to like Sacramento, but it's a place that people a lot of times think of as a place you go to for like cheaper wines and bulk grapes. And, what's crazy is when you visit this place, you realize very quickly that there is a shocking amount of small producers who are doing what Markus is doing, the producer of this wine, which is working with some of the oldest vines in the country. I mean, we're talking about vines that date back all the way to the 1800s. And what's super fascinating is that these are not like, you know, older is not always better, right? In terms of like how much they're producing and what they're producing. But in this case, like these are incredible old vines that produce a teeny tiny amount of grapes. The vines have to constantly be attended to. They have to be farmed by hand in most cases, harvested by hand in most cases. And like I said, they're not like, it's not like they're making, you know, producing tons of grapes to give you this bountiful crop. So it sounds like a banker's worst nightmare, but it is the story of Lodi and some of these producers who really do this out of passion and for the love of the game. So you have producers like Markus, who are not only working with these old vines, but you're working with grapes that like not a lot of people have even heard of. And Carignane is one of them. It used to be one of the most widely planted grapes in California. It was one of those grapes that like got massively overproduced for a time. And so it sort of lost its character in the process. And people kind of forgot that like this is actually a really interesting grape. But you have some producers that are bringing it back as a solo variety because we oftentimes see it blended in. And I think this is a really, really beautiful example. This particular one, this is from the Nicolini ranch. This is planted in the 1930s. And you can smell like it's got this like spicy sort of savory character. It's definitely very fruity, but not in like a super aggressive way. Like it's kind of dark and brambly. I don't know. This almost smells like if you took away some of the more like oxidative qualities that you get from port and like that sweet quality, it almost has like the darkness of a Portuguese red wine that you would have, right?
Mm-hmm. Like dark cherry. It's really just delicious. Yeah. This is really
it's brambly. Nice, it's delicious. I had somebody message me recently who just like immediately popped the wine and like, oh my God, I know I should have waited for this show, but like I couldn't. And I'm so glad because this is so delicious. They were so excited. And I was like, you're right. Like this is one of my favorite finds that we've had to date. So hopefully some of you are drinking this with us. I do have a slight chill on this as I normally do. This is a wine that I think you could go either way depending on what glass you're going to use. This is in a Burgundy bottle, so like a Burgundy glass would definitely work for this, but it's got enough like character and body that if you wanted to put it in a Bordeaux glass and kind of feel like it's got a little bit more structure to it, you could do that as well. I'm using my all-purpose Gabriel glass, which is lovely. You're using a Burgundy. Yeah. We're having a great time.
Yeah, it's great. And I have heard amazing things. I haven't had the opportunity to meet Markus, but our awesome sales rep that works with him just loves him to pieces and has said amazing things about him and all his wines and his technical abilities. And he is, according to her, just an amazing guy and a real big cork dork and a dork about all things wine, which we love working with people like that because
I love that.
He really cares about the quality and And the wine's incredible. I mean, you can kind of
Yeah.
tell a lot about a winemaker, obviously, by their art form. So
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's the story of Lodi in general, is like, there's just so many great people there. And it is a sea of farmers and passionate people who really care about these old vines. I mean, you've got Tegan working up there from Sandlands and Turley, Mindy and Michelle from Lorenzo working with they do a little Carignane as well that they turn into their Lorenzo Rosé. There's so much great stuff happening there. And so I'm really excited. I think this is our very first wine that we featured from Lodi, and I think we picked a pretty good one. If you pulled the cork out of this bottle and you matched it with like another random cork that you maybe have from maybe in your home goods vessel, I don't know. But if you grabbed another cork, you'll see that like there's a difference in corks, and there's lots of different corks. And I think maybe where we can venture to next is all the different corks that are out there, because we've all seen them. You know, you've got everything from like agglomerated to natural to different versions within those categories. Yeah, exactly. All right. So let's walk me through all the different types of corks out there and kind of like where you might see. I know. I'm about to like get you in the weeds. I'm sorry.
I would try to keep this as concise as possible, because there are truly all different types of options for different wines. And really, Amorim's stance specifically is that, you know, we have all different types of cork closures, and it's up to the winemaker. We have data and information, and it's all up to the winemaker to make the decision of what's best for their wine. And they know best how they make their wines. So different auction transfers with different types of closures, you know, different developments for your wine, depending on the closure that you choose. So here's the options, choose wisely kind of thing. But yeah, so we have, you know, a natural cork, which is what Markus has chosen for this red wine.
That's what Markus has on here.
Yeah, which is 100% a bark of a tree. It's just a classic natural cork. It's the most classic closure that exists. And then, you know, there is sparkling corks. Everyone has seen different types of sparkling corks. You have the Amorim branded ones. I've got the blank ones over here.
Which are different. So point out why these are different. Because if you look, by the way, if you're looking at the YouTube video right now, you'll see that it doesn't look like a sparkling cork because it's not been put into a bottle yet. So walk us through why this looks the way it does. It's got two pieces.
So another really cool thing, I think that's mind-blowing for a lot of people, is they pull a sparkling cork out and they see a mushroom shape and they assume the cork comes in that shape, but actually it doesn't. It comes in this shape. And once you insert it into the bottle, the shape of the bottle and the pressure from the CO2 for the cork will create that mushroom shape because you need more compression because of the pressure in the bottle. So they all look like this. I mean, again, there's 3 different types of sparkling corks. Some cork producers will produce only one type. We have an array of different types, but you have a double disc, which is 2 natural discs on the bottom, which is the most traditional type of sparkling cork. And then you have, you know, single disc sparkling corks, and then you have 100% microgranulated, which would be 100% that just look like the top here. And then you've got 100% microgranulated cork, which is totally different than a classic natural cork. And, you know, there are a lot of different iterations of microgranulated corks out there. People are very familiar with a lot of these. Our technology, our newest technology is Export technology, which is the name of a type of cleaning technology that's the most updated supercritical CO2 technology on the market. Not to get in the weeds, but essentially, you know, this type of technology has been around for a long time. Not as much applied to cork, but you know, to turn coffee into decaf, things like that. And it completely extracts and removes TCA, which is cork taint.
Right.
The nickname is cork taint. I don't like the nickname because you can find it in other things other than cork. It's naturally occurring. You could find it in wood, barrels, things like that. Baby carrots. Yes, you go to the grocery store and I can't even buy them because
there's always one.
Yeah, there's always just they reek. But it's really neat because these are the technology completely extracts a lot of those phenolics. It's a very neutral closure. Not all microgranulated corks are created equal. It depends on the producer, but for us, we're big on the most amount of cork in the cork. Why add anything else when you have the best material in the world, which is cork?
Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit. Okay, so we talked natural cork, champagne cork, which could be the agglomerated with the discs. Mm-hmm. And then we have agglomerated, right? Am I saying that right? Agglomerated?
Yeah. Yes. Micro-agglomerated, really.
Micro-agglomerated. Okay. Yeah. Micro-agglomerated, which is what? So that's, I'm holding up the Expert on camera right now, which is a version of it. It's not always going to be this, but what is a micro?
What is it? Okay. Micro-agglomerated.
What is it?
It's cork material that is unit molded.
Natural cork. Starting from natural cork.
Yes. So, okay. When you punch a natural cork, you have a lot of extra material and you can use that material. So a big thing for us is to use all the cork. Nothing is wasted at Amorim. It's a huge circular economy. We use every part. So you grind up the cork and then you can create granules from this. Or if a natural cork doesn't hit a quality standard that a natural cork needs to, then we can use that bark and we can use supercritical CO2, remove the TCA, and make it into microgranulated cork. So it's the best of both worlds. We use all of it. Once we create a microgranulated cork, we have the pieces, and then we can bind them back together with a binder. There's two different types of binders that Amorim specifically has, and one is just a standard FDA approved binder, and another one is a vegetable oil based binder. But it's 98% cork, 2% binder. So there's nothing else. It's just cork and binder, and that's it. So whereas there are other companies that feel the need to add other things and in microgranulated corks for compressibility, but we don't believe in that. So we as a company try to keep things as sustainable as possible. Use the cork as the superstar. We love cork, and it's such a cool material. Why use anything else?
Right.
This is another thing Amanda, I think, was surprised by when she came to Portugal, is she got to see when the corks are ground up. We actually have machines that use the cork dust from the grinding process that helps fuel over 65% of our energy needs for Amorim by using that biomass. So we run off cork dust. So it's really cool. It's a really amazing process. We want to use all of it. But yeah, and there are other types of corks too. These are, as we get on the line, I'm just taking as we grab.
No, and I mean, these are like the three primary types of corks, and you have lots of different versions of that within. And what I didn't even realize is that within the natural cork world, there's different like levels of cork. Like there's some very expensive corks that like you guys are almost like jewelers in some regard, right? Like you're looking for like the diamonds, right? Like there's different grades of cork. And so what you're looking for, when we went to the very top floor and we saw there was like one person who was like looking for the diamonds in the rough, like the cleanest, silkiest, like no, is that one of them? Like the most beautiful, pristine cork you can imagine. And like those, so how much approximately? Like we're talking about like these are crazy expensive corks that are going into like the most expensive bottles.
I mean, the cost ranges so much. Yeah. Like the cost ranges so much with a natural cork because there's also different types of testing and like curative measures that you can add on as well. So, but it's very much a visual, and a lot of research has shown that the outside of the cork is an indicator of the internal structure for long-term ageability. So a lot of the highest end clients will go for the most beautiful corks they can. But again, natural corks there's such a range of looks. And if you pull out a beautiful, beautiful natural cork, I mean, you realize how rare it is, how many people touch this cork before it ends up in your wine. It's pretty incredible that corks can cost less than $1 a piece. I mean, just in my opinion, just as many people that touch it, and that all the different quality control measures a cork goes through, how inexpensive corks can go from like cents to dollars.
Yeah.
It's it's pretty incredible. It's a really cool process. And really, really special.
One thing that we have to talk about that you sort of touched on was this idea of TCA and, as we affectionately call it, cork taint. So
yes,
as a sommelier, this is like one of those things that, and as a wine drinker, is one of those annoying things in the wine world that we've had to navigate through. And like, luckily in the past decade or so, there have been a lot of advances in the cork world, we'll say, that have changed that. But I want to talk a little bit about cork taint and what that means, or TCA. So for those of you who have ever opened a bottle of wine that has had a natural cork in it, and if you've smelled the bottom of that cork or you've tasted the wine and it smells a little like grandma's basement or wet cardboard or newspaper, that is a version of cork taint. And as PJ pointed out, it doesn't only exist with cork or even in wine. You can exist in lots of different places. Like when I walk around California sometimes after a rainstorm,
yes,
I'll walk around and like smell different like vegetation that like has been infected, so to speak, with TCA. Baby carrots, a lot of times, carrots in general, just like a big place where I don't know why that is, but like if I get like a carrot juice or like a green juice that has like carrots in it for some reason, like I always smell it. It's just one of those things that like you can be a little bit more sensitive to. And I will say there's absolutely nothing wrong with drinking a corked wine. It will not hurt you. It will not infect you. There's nothing viral happening. All it is basically the wine is just basically taking on these less than delicious characteristics. It can happen in lots of different levels. So like some people are more sensitive to it than others. But what else am I missing on this front? Because you're the expert.
We've spent the last, 2 to 3 decades just studying this and trying to create curative and preventative measures. And as you said, it's naturally occurring in the environment, and there are
in nature.
Yeah. It's just cork has a capacity, just the spongy nature to take on more TCA, you could say. But we've done a lot of curative measures, just by the way that we harvest it, all the way through the process of, not using wood pallets that could possibly have it to spread it. But, TCA needs a vector to spread. So I think the baby carrots maybe has a lot to do with they use chlorinated products to clean it, perhaps. I'm not sure about that. I'm not an expert in baby carrots, but the way that you clean things, you want to make sure you don't have something that would create more of that compound, and so removing chlorinated products as cleaning. I don't know if you've ever experienced somebody cleans with bleach on their floor and they have wood floors and it smells like TCA in a room or a house. That can spread that compound. So you have to think about, changing those kind of things up to maybe peroxide based things or not chlorinated things, because it is a 2,4,6 trichloroanisole. So it's chlorine kind of helps spread it. It's a vector for it, and alcohol will spread. It needs a vector. So you actually could have, this is actually another myth or interesting thing about cork is you can have a cork, and I know that a lot of you out there that drink a lot of wine have probably experienced this, where there's a little bit of TCA in the top part of the cork, and so you take the cork out and you smell TCA and you're like, what the heck? But the wine is perfectly fine because it was in the top part of the cork. Wine never touched that part that was infected, and it didn't have a vector to spread. So the cork actually protected. You could store a bottle with a cork closure in it in a place that has atmospheric TCA, and the wine, it'll protect the wine as long as it doesn't touch the alcohol. So it needs a vector to spread into the wine.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's actually, cork can actually protect from TCA, which is kind of a funny thing.
Right.
But yeah, so it can occur in a lot of other things too. We've heard of, it hardly ever happens, but we've heard of situations where a barrel had cork taint in it, or I keep calling it cork taint. It should just be TCA positive because it's not a good look for cork. But it's the industry as a whole I mean, Amorim really being the leaders and setting examples and fighting cork TCA, or the problem of TCA. The industry as a whole has really stepped up, and cork has definitely made a major comeback in the last decade. Even in the last 5 years, the technology is incredible. For Amorim, for me to speak for Amorim, because I understand the technology we use really well. I mean, we're looking at TCA now down to below 1%, like a fraction of a percent of TCA. It's not a problem, it still, happens, but it's not a problem like it was before. And as the time goes on, people are, 2 to 3 years behind the technology that are drinking wines, because, people bottle the wines and then...
Right. We're drinking a 2021 right now.
Yeah, exactly. So as the technology gets better in the next 5 to 10 years, it just will be such a rarity in all different types of corks that people won't even, when you do get one, it'll be such a big deal because you just won't see it like it once was.
And I think for cork, there's a lot of conversation around lots of different closures, right? Because cork is not the only thing that's out there. You have screw top, you have glass enclosure, you have plastic, which Miguel Cabral was really, really interesting in pointing out that basically that was low man on the totem pole in terms of what ages the best. So I thought that was very interesting. But, this idea of cork and TCA and some of the arguments against it, I think it's easy for me to sit here as a sommelier and say there's always going to be a risk of TCA with any cork, with any natural cork. But the reality is companies like Amorim have taken such extraordinary steps to eradicate the problem, down to the Expert is a great example, right? I've done a video on this. This is a great example of, basically you guys are guaranteeing anyone who uses this cork, which is a microagglomerated cork that, as you said, it's getting put through this CO2,
supercritical CO2 technology.
Supercritical CO2. So they're basically removing all the TCA, putting it back together. And so you have this product that goes into a cork goes into a bottle that does all the things that we love about a cork. It completely eradicates it, right? So if you see Expert on your cork, you know that you've got a TCA-free bottle. But also within the natural cork world, you guys are doing a ton of testing to make sure that even natural cork is a lot better.
I mean, we have an Inditech technology that tests each natural cork one by one with a gas chromatography machine that we will guarantee. So we have the guarantee on our natural cork segment too. And so it's interesting to see there are options for people. If TCA truly is something that they do not have any type of tolerance for, we have options in every segment of what we sell for no TCA. So, I mean, it's pretty incredible that it's gotten to that point in the wine industry. And we test a 0.5 parts per trillion, which is a drop in 800 Olympic-sized swimming pools, to give you an idea of the amount that we test for our Inditech corks. So, I mean,
that's crazy.
It's pretty, there's really nobody in the industry that's doing the kind of extremes that we are. And
you guys are batch testing too, even not at the Inditech level. Just to be clear, this is not just only these guys are getting tested.
No.
They're also batch testing these other corks as well. So even when you're talking about wineries that maybe can't afford these super expensive corks, there are a ton of measures being taken to ensure that you're getting the best possible product.
Oh yeah. I mean, our regular natural cork is without the Inditech testing. The Inditech's just an extra step of testing that ensures that that extra comfort for people, but the quality control up to that point is incredible. I mean, we have TCA checkpoints at every single part of the cork process, all the way down to even the bark. When we bring the bark in, you saw the bark getting boiled down. We test that was cool. We test them at many parts of the process. So you'll have to come in and see at some point. If anyone ever wants to learn more, you could come in and we can show you around and we would love to talk about it.
Yeah, no, and I know that this is like sort of like sounding like a commercial for Amorim, but I think the reality is like these guys they're the best at what they do in the cork world, and the cork world is so important to the wine world, and the one cannot exist really without the other, right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that Amorim is not just sitting there going like, well, this is just like what happens when you use cork. Like, no, like they're doing a lot to make sure that like we know as an industry that cork is the best closure that we have at this moment in time. And it has been used for hundreds of years because of that. So the fact that there are measures being taken to combat one of the primary issues with cork, the only primary issue with cork, is incredible. So I think, for me, this was an episode that it was important to dispel a lot of myths around cork. It was important to talk about what it is, but it's also important to show you that like, as much as this has been around for forever, this is also not just something that, because it's rooted in history, is living in history. Like it is a very progressive product as well.
And it's like we are in a constant pursuit of excellence and perfection.
Yes.
And we will continue to study. And the next chapter of cork will be really fascinating that I can't exactly talk about yet, but there's a lot of really exciting research that we're doing within the Amorim world that I think will change the way people look at different types of corks and the way that your wine will develop over the life. So, I mean, there's constantly research coming out. It's a very special place, and there's nothing like a cork material. It's just a cool material.
Now, whoever is listening to this will not, pull the cork out and throw it out. You said you have, what are we doing with our corks after we pull them? What's best case scenario?
There are a lot of different places, depending on where you are in the US. You can go to recork.org, or you can look up Cork Collective. There are different recycling initiatives around, and it will show you areas that accept recycled corks. And when we say recycled corks, we just mean corks that you've popped out of your bottle. And essentially, those people will ship the corks back to collection centers or recycling partners like Amorim. And we wait until we have enough to bring a container, and we bring them back to Portugal, and they get made into yoga mats and different, just extending the life of the material. It could be sports inlay, fields, insulation. It's a really great material that you can use longer. It'll never be used for another wine cork. It'll be used for other applications, but it's just great to be able to reuse the material. So that's what happens.
Yeah.
Happens to the material after. So we don't reuse the cork for wine, but we reuse it for a lot of different things.
It's a fascinating product, one that I will continue to ask you about, because every now and then I'll just randomly text you. I'm somewhere and I'm like, hey, can you remind me
of this? Yeah.
It's one of those things that I never knew that I would care so much about, but I'm so glad to have met you and to have, been introduced to the Amorim team and to go to Portugal and see all these things. And I truly do have such a passion for this now. If you guys have questions, feel free to shoot them to me in our DMs on Instagram, and I would be happy to relay them to PJ. Yeah. All of the links to the recycling places, we will definitely put in the description for you. And as always, if you guys want to keep in touch with us, you can do so via our Instagram on wineaccessunfiltered, via the comments on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing to this, leaving us reviews. PJ, thank you so much. I love that you took everybody to church.
I love it. It's I feel really lucky to have been able to come on here and talk about cork. And we love questions. We love questions we don't know as well. It gets our team excited about researching things. So if we don't know something, we'll do our best to get you the right answer. But thank you, Amanda. You're awesome. Really, really appreciate how much you love cork, and it's great for the industry as a whole. We want everybody to use more cork and get excited about it.
I feel like I've done my part now by shouting from the rooftops, and now you guys can do it as well. So thank you so much. As a reminder, this is available on YouTube, and if you are not a member of the podcast Wine Club, you can do so by going to the description below. PJ, I wish you all the best. I hope to see you soon. Cheers.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.